You're listening to Garibaldi Red, a Nottingham Forest podcast brought to you by Nottinghamshire Live.
Good afternoon and welcome to Garibaldi Red, the Nottingham Forest podcast from Nottinghamshire Live. My name is Matt Davies and I'm joined today by Reds fan and journalist Dan Storey. Good afternoon, how are you, mate?
I'm very well, thanks. Yourself?
Yeah, good, thank you, good. And also our Reds correspondent, Sarah Clapson. Good afternoon, Sarah. Are you well?
Yes, I am. Good afternoon, Matt. And Dan.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Right, it's our 1 year anniversary today. I forgot to make note of that. Yeah, our first podcast.
You forgot to make a cake as well.
Well, in the real world, as is tradition in our office, there would have been a cake, but yeah, there's a rotten apple for my lunch yesterday. That's about it. So perhaps that sums up Forest season, actually. Yeah. Although, well, we can talk about a win, an uplifting win, a tense win. I said on Twitter last night, I don't get nervous about results, but I did last night as they beat Coventry City because it was such an important result. Sarah, you watched the game. What did you make of it?
I thought Forest were pretty good last night. It was a bit I think I get your nerves. Towards the end, they were under the cosh a little bit. But I thought to come from behind, that showed a lot of character. I thought that they looked better going forward than they have in recent weeks. And they defended really well. They were pretty solid. Joe Worrell was absolutely brilliant. I think since he's come back from injury, he's been absolutely superb. And he was again last night. And Brice Samba did well. I thought he was back to probably his best. He made some really good saves and he just looked generally more commanding and comfortable than he has done previously. And the new signings did well. I thought James Garner was excellent. He looks like he could be a really good addition. Krovinovic, if I can say it, he did well again. Glenn Murray came on and played a part. So, and Lewis Grabban getting a goal was really important, I think, as much for his confidence as hopefully getting a few people off his back. So overall, I think it was a good night.
What did you make of the additions over January then, Dan? Because Krovinovic and Garner are obviously identified as important cogs in a new look midfield. Were you impressed by the business done and particularly those two players and what they can change, hopefully?
Yeah, I mean, they were the 16th, 17th and 18th signings of the season. So Forest are always going to have that turnover of players. We've learnt that by now. But actually, if you take that window in isolation, it's pretty good business. I didn't have huge expectations of Garner, not because I think he's a bad player, but just because I thought it would probably take him quite a while to get up to speed. And the tendency at Forest, if it does take you a while, other players can quickly pass you by because there's just so many in the squad. So hugely important for him to start well. I thought he was probably certainly our best attacking player. Yes, great. Glenn Murray is a good sign, I think, because it's a sign that Chris, he's very much a Chris Hughton signing, which suggests that the manager is at least getting a chance to bring his own players in rather than having players kind of foisted upon him, which other managers might have complained about in the past. So, yeah, all in all, pretty positive, I think.
My big gripe about the team this season, the biggest one, I would say, is the ball moving too slowly through midfield and wingers not getting the balls in good enough positions. And then obviously strikers not getting service in turn particularly well. Is that something that you would feel has been the biggest problem as well, Dan? Or do you think that there's something else that's been missing?
Yeah, absolutely. Sammy and Joe Lolly have come in for a bit of flack for their performances, but the reality is that if you pass the ball slowly through midfield, when they get the ball, the opposition has had time to bed in and probably put two players on whichever of them receives it, and it's very hard for for Championship players to beat those two players and then create a chance for a striker. We need to play the ball quicker. I understand why Hughton is fairly risk averse in terms of, he will reason that if we keep clean sheets, then we can move up the table pretty quickly. But there has to be a balance because not last night, but over recent games, it's been pretty turgid stuff. And it looks like Forest kind of only ever react when they go behind. And obviously that happened again last night, but there did seem to be a different form of intent at least. And, Joe and Sammy and whoever plays there will hugely appreciate that because their work has not been easy.
Do you think then, Sarah, that, I mean, you don't want to put too much on Garner after one game, but there's a good highlight reel of him I've seen this morning of him pinging 40-yard and 50-yard balls, which is something that's been missing, horribly this season. Do you think him and Krovinovic could provide a little bit of entertainment and pep Forest up as an attacking force?
Yeah, I think they're probably two important signings in that sense. Garner looked really comfortable on the ball, and he can definitely pick a pass. I mean, he set up Lewis Graben's goal essentially with that brilliant ball, and it was a real peach of a pass. If he can keep doing that, I think he could really be important for them this season. Forest still haven't replaced Ben Watson. I think that's been a big problem in midfield. They've got so many midfielders. A lot of them are quite similar. But none of them have been able to do what Ben Watson did last year. James Garner is a different type of player, but I think he's probably the closest to being able to do what Watson did. And it's such a key role. Krovinovic as well, I think he just adds a little bit more. He looks like he wants to get on the ball and create things and have a bit more drive. And Forest haven't had too much of that this season. I think they have had players who have been out of form, like Lolly. Amiobi's been a bit up and down. Knockhart started a bit slowly, but has started to find his feet. If they can get everybody playing like we know they can, I think there's definitely quality there. It's been able to get the best out of them and been able to create chances for the strikers, because for a long while it wouldn't matter who played up front. There was just nothing there. They were getting no service. They were getting no support. They could have had Messi in the team and Forest probably still wouldn't have scored a goal. But if they can start adding a bit more, then there's the quality there. So I think Chris Hughton still needs to get a bit more out of the team, and there's still room for improvement. But I think it's looking a bit more confident now, I think.
Yeah, I mean, jumping way ahead on my list of questions. I mean, where do you stand on this team as it is today, Dan? Is this team going to stay up comfortably? Is it a decent enough team to do what's required in the short term?
I hope so, and player for player, quality wise, both what they've produced, or actually in the main more what they've produced for previous clubs, it should be. But it's a team that has been, you cannot separate the club and the team. And when there's a huge turnover of players, when there's kind of upheaval at the club, which seems to have dogged Forest for the best part of a decade, let's be honest, it's very hard. It's very hard for every manager, and it's very hard for the players. Particularly, I think, during the current circumstances, where if you do sign 7 or 8 players in a summer, then it takes a long while to get used to them, because you're not spending time with them socially, you're not building bonds, you're not creating that unity which every successful Chris Hughton team has had. So that takes longer. The key is for this not to be another false dawn, because we've seen that before. When we beat Millwall at home, it was a sign of things improving, and then we kind of fell back to our old habits, and that needs to be avoided, because they need to go again and beat Wycombe. They need to prove that they can hold their own, because they've got they've got a horrible run coming up in March, for example, that if they go into that without confidence, then they'll quickly slip back down the table.
Yeah, my concern with them this season has been that they seem to be all right against the lesser teams. I mean, they've beaten Coventry twice, and they've done quite well against the teams down the bottom end of the league. But when they play the good teams, they just perform okay and lose. Is that the concern, Sarah? That it's running for the next few weeks after the Wycombe game, then?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's just where Forest are at the minute. They're not in that top bracket of teams, so they are going to struggle against them. I think that's going to be the case probably for now until the end of the season. It's just about doing enough and making sure they get the points against the teams like Coventry, like Wycombe, picking those wins up where they can and trying to get as much breathing space before they go into that tough run of fixtures. They're an inconsistent side, and I don't think that's not going to be solved overnight. They're not suddenly going to turn into a team that beats those good teams week in, week out. It's just where they are at the minute, I think. But I think they probably do have just about enough to stay up. I hope they do anyway. Although I thought in the summer they had a squad that was good enough for a playoff challenge. So perhaps my prediction isn't the best.
No, I thought they did if they started well, but they certainly didn't start well. What about we talk about that turnover of players? Then one player who signed permanently before the game last night was Cafu, who I must admit I'm not fully convinced by. I've talked about moving the ball quickly through midfield, and everything he does seem to be quite slow. But he's done okay, so I'm not saying he's a bad player. But I suppose the question is, Dan, is he an upgrade at all on what they have, or is he just another one of the new signings that fits into this mould of being much of a muchness in compared to what's already in the squad.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think his best assist so far this season is probably being signed permanently so that Garner can be brought in. He falls into that mould of Forest players who just seem to arrive, and from day one, you're never quite confident that they're either wanted or particularly necessarily want to be there. And, we hand out 2.5, 3-year contracts to these players, and then either we use the ownership model to move them on, invariably to Greece, or they kind of fall into that Zach Clough mould where you even as committed Forest supporters, you forget they're there a year later. I hope that isn't the case, but you look at the team last night and you look at the central midfielders and attacking midfielders that played, and you think, well, it's going to take an injury crisis for him to start games regularly, quite frankly, unless he shows Chris Hughton something in training. But you can't honestly tell me that Chris Hughton went to the Forest hierarchy this week and said, look, I really want this Cafu guy's loan to be made permanent because I think he's the answer. It felt like an administrative signing as much as something for the future.
What do you think, Sarah? Are we being a bit harsh? He does take a good set piece. He takes a better set piece than some of the players that are in the squad, and he's done all right. So is it a smart bit of business or not?
I think that's probably it. He's done okay. He's done all right. He's not been amazing. He's definitely not been the pick of the summer signings. I'm not sure I would have handed him a long-term deal, but I think he's done okay. I think that Chris Hughton still seems to struggle with what his best position is. I think, is he a number 10? Is he a number 8? He can play in so many different roles, and I guess that flexibility is good. You want those kind of players in your squad, but I'm not entirely sure which one he's best suited to. I thought that he looked better further forward, but then he says that he's more of a defensive midfielder. So he seems to be, yeah. I mean, the fact he can play in a few different roles is good.
What's the best midfield three when they're all fit, Sarah?
I think Knockhart's played his way into being first choice in there now. Kravinovic probably. It's difficult between. I think Mighton should be in there. I think he deserves more game time, but Chris Hughton seems to like Sami Amiobi, and then probably the midfield two behind them. James Garner's definitely got to be one, and Ryan Yates. I think probably he's been up there with the player of the season so far, which says a lot about everybody else, really.
What do you think, Dan? If you were picking a midfield three and two wingers today, who would you have?
Yeah, I mean, on individual talent, it should be a really good team. It should be Lolly and Knockout on the wings, and then Garner and Yates in the middle. It should pick itself. But when you lose games as regularly as we do, and when the fixtures come so thick and fast, it doesn't really feel like Forest have ever had, or Chris Hughton even has ever had, his idea of a best choice first 11 yet. Hopefully signings in January will change that, and hopefully Garner plays 15, 16 games between now and the end of the season and knuckles down a place, because it's so hard to get things going, particularly in the first 30 minutes of games when the team is changing every week and nobody's really sure who's first choice for their position.
True. One player we haven't talked about who would definitely be in the first 11 is Scott McKenna, and I guess that's a good thing, Sarah, in a sense that they didn't miss him too much last night. Figueiredo was coming for a lot of flack, rightly so, in generally in the way he's played, but he did do well last night, didn't he? He did all right against Barnsley as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought he did pretty well last night alongside Joe Worrell. And he is a good player. He's just had a real dip in form probably since the restart last season, Figueiredo. But on his day, he can be a good defender. It is a blow to lose Scott McKenna because him and Joe Worrell are undoubtedly the first choice partnership, and together they're really good. But to have an option like Figueiredo to come in and do a job, I think Chris Hughton's pretty well stocked in terms of central defenders. You've got Loa Combeso and Michael Dawson, who hasn't even played yet this season. So he is well covered there.
Am I going to give Figueiredo a big out here, Dan, by saying maybe it's tough for foreign players stuck in a foreign country during a pandemic when they're quite isolated? And it can be difficult mentally, and there has been talk of him wanting to go back for feeling a bit homesick. Am I giving him too much of an excuse for his struggles this season or not?
I think that's probably fair. I think we too readily overlook that human aspect, particularly as I mentioned earlier, with regards to the current circumstances, does make for that. You overlook just how important teammates can be, and a close-knit group. That's the positive way of selling cliques, but you do get a number of close-knit groups within a squad, and if you can't spend that much time together, it must be hard. And it's hard when you're not playing football as well, when you're training and not playing every week, because I can see in a foreign country, living in your own little bubble and then training every day to not actually perform on a Saturday must be really, really hard. And if he thinks he can get a first choice centre back gig back home, then you kind of understand his feelings. But we might well need him this season, and hopefully the last two games are a sign of things to come, because I think he fits that Houghton mould. You look at the Brighton team with Duncan Duffy, he wants central defenders first and foremost. He wants players that can clear it, can head it, can tackle, can lead the line, kind of organise the defence. And it's no coincidence that Brice Samba looks more solid, I think, when he has those kind of solid central defenders in front of him.
Yeah, I mean, the manager must rate Figueiredo, mustn't he, Sarah? Because Embé-So hasn't done too much wrong when he's played, and Michael Dawson hasn't had a kick. So the manager must be a big fan of the Figueiredo-Worrell partnership.
Yeah, I think so. It's probably like Dan says, really. They're kind of two old-fashioned centre-halves. A bit like Scott McKenna is as well. Houghton is generally quite a cautious manager, and his priority when he came in was to tighten Forest up and make them harder to beat. I think essentially he's done that. And yeah, he does seem to like Tobias Figueiredo. I think it helps when you do have a settled defence, and the fact that they've generally kept with Cyrus Christie and Yuri Ribeiro as the two fullbacks, and Joe Worrell alongside another. I think that's probably helped them a lot. They do look a lot more solid now, I think, Forest.
We talk of a settled defence there. Ribeiro's back now from his 3-match ban. I mean, who is actually the first choice left back now? Is it still Ribeiro, Dan, or has Bong, by hook or by crook, done enough to keep his place?
I think Ribeiro probably is still first choice. There was obviously that kind of uncertainty at the start of the season where there are rumours about him being sold. But he is as consistent, I think, as you get in a Forest team this season. Gaëtan Bong is, he knows Chris Hughton. Chris Hughton knows him. He's seen as a dependable pro, I think, albeit one on far too much money for a non-starting championship player. But he's good to have around, I think, and he has filled in pretty well. It should be said. It's not easy just to come in and play a role like fullback that relies on you both getting forward, staying back, and having good relationships with wingers that seem to change every week, and central defenders. And obviously, yeah, I don't think he's good enough for a team that wants to be top half of the championship, if I'm honest, anymore. But yeah, I think Ribeiro probably is. What
about Christie, Dan? I mean, the comments in the stream here are almost always negative about Christie. Is he a bit unfortunate that he's, the guy after Matty Cash, who was way too good for the championship? Does Christie suffer a bit from that, or is he actually not that good?
I think he's probably a decent player, but to my mind, he's the perfect personification of a Forest signing, because he did really well at his other club and the club before that, and looks like if not a complete right back, then certainly a right back that could go forward and defend properly. And this season, we're not really seeing, or we haven't really seen enough of either. And I think that happens when you've got, you're parachuted into a club right before the start of the season, in which you expect you're probably going to have to play 45, 46 games if you can. And it's hard to build up those relationships. And as I say, fullback is a position where you probably need that more than anything. And as soon as the confidence dips, you must begin to think, like, what have I signed up for here? The fans are on my back. I'm not playing that well. I'm making individual mistakes. I'm getting caught out of position occasionally. And it's a really hard thing to get back from when you're playing twice a week.
I mean, he spoke, I did a press conference with him a while ago. He spoke about the challenges of being a lone player and knowing that your future doesn't necessarily lie there. And at the moment, Forest team might have a whole squad in that sense, mightn't they? Because they've got 5 players on loan, and they've got a squad who probably quite a lot of them know the manager might want to move them on. That must be a difficult situation for the whole club, in a sense, manager and players, Sarah, mustn't it, if I'm right?
Yeah, I think you've probably got a really good point. I think it's Forest recruitment longer term, like going back, you're kind of seeing the effects of that now. You've got so many players that were signed by so many different managers, even though it's only been a few years, because Forest have such a high turnover of players and of managers. It's a real mishmash of a dressing room, and to try and get that bond and try and forge those relationships isn't easy. Again, particularly when you've got loan players who know that come the end of the season, their futures are up in the air. They'll probably get moved on or go back to their parents' clubs or go somewhere else. It is difficult. I do feel for Cyrus Christie. I think I do think that he suffers from not being Matty Cash. I think he's okay. I think he can be good going forward. His crossing maybe needs to improve a little bit. He puts plenty in, but the final ball isn't always there. Defensively, he does okay. He's made a few errors, but I think pretty much everybody in the Forest team has made an error this season defensively. So he's not alone on that front. I think he does okay for what Forest need.
Mm-hmm. I mean, is the club in kind of stasis at the moment, Dan, in just trying to get to the end of the season? And then will we have another rebuild? Or is Houghton gradually building something that there might be a few 4 or 5 tweaks and 6 or 7 of this team will still be around next season? It's difficult to say if not in his head, but how do you see it going?
It depends on him as well, because the shelf life of a Forest manager is just less than a year. And if we finish 19th, 20th, 21st, will he maybe even see his future elsewhere? It's Forest like a roller coaster that just keeps doing the same lap, and eventually it gets really boring. Roller coasters are exciting, but if you do the same one 15 times a day, it loses its edge. And that's Forest, I think. You're right, they're in status, but they're also kind of a mishmash of a club that seems to lurch from one ideal to the other and never really commits to anything. And that's so hard for managers. That is the breaking of managers. I think it was probably the breaking of Lamouchi, the breaking of managers before him. And I think I said on here before when I came on, the big worry for me with Houghton is that Forest would kind of drag him down quicker than he could impose himself on the squad and the club. And maybe to some extent that's what's happened already. I don't think we've played as well or got the results that he would have expected or wanted since he's joined. And that turnover of players must be a part of that.
I think I'm a bit more optimistic. I don't think, like you say, he's a naturally conservative person. I think maybe it's a bit more of an evolutionary thing with Forest. And the recruitment does look like they were his players, which is a positive, as you say. Do you think, Sarah, that it's going to be a case of he's gradually going to build a team and we're not going to see a rapid transformation with Forest, and maybe next season we'll see a more distinct style of play?
Yeah, I think so. I think if you probably look at where Chris Houghton's been in the past, that's happened as well. And I think that was probably always going to be the case for whoever came in for the Forest job after Sabri Lamouchi. You always need time. You always need that space to build. And you would think come the summer, he'll get more of a chance to put his mark on the squad. He's done that a little bit in January, mostly with loan players. But the summer's really where he'll get a chance to look at and assess and put his team together, put a team together that he thinks is good enough and that can do the job that he wants. I think we'll probably see quite an overhaul in the summer. I wouldn't be surprised if there's another fairly big turnover of players, whether that's good or bad.
What kind of team do you want then, Dan? From not a journalist, as a fan, what kind of side would you want Forest to be fielding next season, forgetting about this season now?
If Chris Houghton's in charge, I want it to be a team that's built in his own image as a manager, which is typically a smallish squad, a club that is pointing in the right direction, with everything kind of married together, which is exactly what Brighton were. They will be solid defensively. They will play with a target man striker because that's what Glenn Murray did so successfully. And they will have exciting wingers to kind of transition from defence to attack quicker and play on the counter. They really haven't done that well this season. It feels like because they've been under pressure in so many games, when they get the ball back, it's kind of everyone takes a bit of a sigh of relief rather than immediately looking to attack and kind of, getting all bases covered and starting from a deep position, and then you end up being dispossessed and finding passes hard to come by. They will play direct football under Houghton, and that doesn't necessarily link to this kind of glorious ideal that some Forest fans have of how the club should play. But quite frankly, the way we've tried to play, or any manager that's tried to do that, has been unsuccessful in the past. We've had exciting seasons, but we haven't had fully successful ones. And I would rather have a successful team than a team that's good to watch now, which is a kind of a sad thing to say, but also a reflection of where the club's at.
You stumbled nicely into my next question there. Then so I was wondering about team DNAs and ethoses and all that kind of thing. When you look at Brighton pinging the ball around and Leicester, and I was even watching like clips of Blackpool in League One under I think his name is Neil Critchley, the manager, playing some fantastic football. Are you actually that bothered about that now as a Forest fan? I mean, like you say, is it just about winning now?
Well, this season it's certainly about winning. The thing is, football fans always they like to be entertained. Of course they do, and particularly when they come back into games, I think we'll see a huge surge of a kind of demand of managers, because people haven't seen live football for so long. But the reality is that we assume they appointed Chris Hughton for a reason, and that reason cannot have been, if they're sensible, to expect him to play intricate passing triangles. That's not what he's ever pretended to do, and he's been successful doing it a very different way. So if they were putting their eggs in that Hughton basket, i.e. he isn't just going to be another short-termist, he isn't just going to be another firefighter, here's someone we're going to build around, then you have to expect that football. And again, when it's done successfully, those doubts or those concerns, I think, about maybe how the team looks quickly dissipate, I think.
Yeah, Sarah, is this just a hipster football fan thing to want everyone to play like Brighton or Leeds or whoever? I mean, am I too misty-eyed about that? Even going back to the Paul Hart team, which I make no apologies for, because that shaped me as a fan in terms of, football can be brilliant, it can be bloody awful when Neil Warnock's the one celebrating at the end. But I've digressed from my point. I mean, is football DNAs and all that kind of stuff too much of a thing for fans, Sarah, do you think?
I think everybody wants to see good football, don't they? Everybody wants to see good attacking football, but it doesn't always get you the right results. I mean, you think back to not that long ago when Philippe Montagnier was in charge and Forest was scoring, 4 or 5 goals, but conceding 6 and losing. And you end up getting nowhere. So there are different ways to win matches and there are different ways to be successful. Chris Hughton has his own way of being successful and he's proven that. And if that gets Forest where they want to be, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing.
We've not really touched on Glenn Murray yet. He actually got off the bench against Coventry ahead of Lyle Taylor. Does that say anything about Taylor? Do we think is Murray now the second choice striker or not? Is it just one game and we're getting ahead of ourselves, Dan?
I don't think he'll start many games, Murray. I think, given age, given miles in the legs, I think he's probably he's a striker for a certain type of match. Maybe away at those bigger sides, maybe he'll start and they'll kind of look longer to him to hold up the ball and bring others into play. I think he offers something different. Forest don't really have pacey strikers. So if you aren't going to have a pacey striker, being a target man is incredibly useful. And I think it's fair to say, I mean, Chris Hughton didn't sign Lyle Taylor for one, but also I think it's fair to say that we probably expected a bit more from Taylor. I think we expected him to, given the struggles of Lewis Grabban this season, I think we probably would have expected Taylor to start more games. But he, it hasn't happened. He's not scored regularly as no Forest striker has, and I don't think Glenn Murray will. But what he can do maybe is link those others into play, because, I mean, Sarah mentioned earlier, but at times this season, Grabban's been basically playing in his own postcode as Forest sit deep and struggle to pass their way out of trouble. So, yeah, I think Murray offers something different. I just wish it was, a 2013 or even 2017 Glenn Murray than a 2021 Glenn Murray, because I don't think he's got that many minutes in the legs.
Who are Forest strikers next season? I mean, Grabban's 33, Taylor's 30, and he's on a couple of years left on his deal, and obviously can't see Glenn Murray being here next season. So who are Forest playing up front? Is it still Grabban, Sarah, or not?
I think they'll probably have to look to bring in another striker in the summer. I mean, you've got Will Swan coming back, obviously, but he's not going to be playing or starting regularly. He'll be there to help out, but I think Lewis Grabban will probably still be here, albeit, I mean, there's been speculation in the past about him going to link up again with Sabri Lamouchi, but I think Forest will have to look and try and bring in another striker in the summer.
Yeah. Where do you stand on Graben, Dan? He's not had a good season, but his pedigree is such that he should still score goals, even if he is 34 with the way he plays the game.
Yeah, he can be incredibly frustrating. You have games where, you watch the first 60 minutes and you wonder why he's still on the pitch, and then suddenly he'll score. He does have a slight issue, even last season when he was scoring, he has a slight issue with chance conversion and confidence, I think. And I think occasionally, because he doesn't do an awful lot more, and that's just how he is as a striker, I think sometimes that can kind of create a perception of laziness, or that he doesn't care. I think they're inaccurate. I think he, like any striker, he's got to where he is because he loves scoring goals and he's been successful doing them. And let's face it, last season he was Forest's top goal scorer for a long, long time. But yeah, his legs won't have gone. I don't see that being an issue. It's just whether there's a hunger to stay at the club, because he might well reason that last season was his big chance to get back into the Premier League, and that chance is probably gone now. And when you get to that sort of age, you do look at money offers, you do look at abroad, because why shouldn't you?
True. Let's look ahead to the weekend then against Wycombe. Are Wycombe down, or can they still stay up? Because I was quite impressed with them when I saw them play. Dan, are they gone already?
Yeah, I think so. I think that it's a hard-working squad with a hard-working, passionate manager, but they got promoted ahead of time. Wycombe fans will say that themselves. That the promotion itself was the kind of the brilliance, and it was very unlikely to be replicated this season with the budgets they're operating on. And I think they were pretty good at City Ground, but they haven't replicated that in other games. And I think they're done, particularly with with Derby and Sheffield Wednesday starting to pick up points as well. I think they will quite quickly be cut adrift.
So is this a must-win game, Sarah? I mean, the table would look a lot different. It'd be on 32 points and could be up to 15th or 16th or wherever. Do Forest have to win this game?
Yeah, I think they do. I think these two games, the Coventry game and the Wycombe game, you'd have to look at them and say we need 6 points from them to give themselves some breathing space. Even if you pick up, I mean, they've lost one in their last 9 league games, and they're still in and around that group at the bottom of the table. It just doesn't seem to have lifted them up far enough. So if they can get another win on Saturday, it would help hugely. And they're the teams they need to be beating. If you're going to stay up this season, you need to be beating the likes of Wycombe and Coventry.
Who are the other two teams going down then, Dan? I assume you're not going to say Forest, but who else are you looking at?
I think Birmingham are in real trouble because I thought Granker's no mug. He knows that division, and unless they manage to get, unless he left and they got someone like Paul Cook in who can cause that kind of surge, I don't think they've got enough. They're sinking like a stone. And the one thing that this run of, or almost unbeaten run of 9 games has done is it has brought others into it. Millwall and Cardiff, and I was looking at Huddersfield last night, and they've sunk like a stone as well, and missed out on a striker on deadline day, and fans kind of really worried about the recruitment model there. So Huddersfield's the one I just wonder about kind of sinking if it starts to go wrong.
Yeah, that's a good point. I looked at Birmingham, I thought, and maybe Sheffield Wednesday. I mean, what do you think, Sarah? Rotherham look okay, actually. Might they stay up?
Yeah, I think they looked okay. There's so many teams, though. It's so tight down there. I think Coventry are another one. If they don't kind of get the results, they can quickly be dragged back into it. Even QPR, I mean, they can still get dragged into it. It's really tight. There's not a lot to choose between a lot of teams. I think that's probably the case throughout the championship as a whole this season. We were talking to Chris Hughton about it the day about how this season, perhaps more than any other, there's so little between teams. It's going to be so close, I think, both at the top and the bottom.
Do we probably see the same starting 11, Sarah? Is there any news on the injury front of anyone who might come back in?
I guess Sam Basal might be the one. He was touch and go for midweek, so it could be that he's back for Saturday. I don't think I would change it, really. I think I would probably stick with the same 11. Why change it when you've just got to win if you don't have to?
Would you go with the same 11 as well, Dan, as well?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. And try and kind of replicate that first half attacking intent and take it through the 90 minutes, because I think Wycombe are a side, if Forest do sit back and invite them on, then they'll create chances. But if Forest can go at them Wycombe must be kind of fragile with confidence, and Forest have to look to exploit that. There's no point trying to, see out the first 30 minutes, try and see out the game and grab something. I think they need to be a little bit more proactive.
Sam Bassau has become a regular topic of conversation on here because his contract is running out and he does have these injury problems. Would you give him a new deal, or is it time to shake his hands and move on, Dan?
Yeah, I think it probably is, sadly. He's not done much wrong in a Forest shirt, but and then we talk about the Kravinovic and Garner, and obviously these are loan signings, so suddenly places open up at the start of next season. But yeah, he's just not really got the run in the team that he has, and he does have these kind of he has these games where you think this is what we want from a Sam Bassau, this is what they've signed up for, and then there's games where they seems to just pass him by and he makes these silly mistakes and kind of almost gets down on himself, and I just don't think we've seen enough to justify what would I assume be another 2 or 3 year contract.
What about Harry Arter? He was linked with a move away. I mean, is Ben Watson the cautionary tale there that a player can be dead and buried and come good? What should they have sold him, Dan? What do you think?
Arter is actually the one who's really disappointed me this season, because I know he's not getting any younger, but he has that Premier League experience. He had successful experience last season. He plays in a position in which he can kind of, he should be able to quite easily implement his game into a new club, because it's a very, it's his own game style. It's harem scarum, it's aggressive, it's tenacious in the tackle, it's kind of bringing up the people around him. And he should have been a leader of this team, and it's just not happened. I don't know why. I don't know if he's not settled in. But they put down a fair amount of money on Harry Arter, and to hear 4 months later that he's being linked with a move away is not ideal.
Is he in danger of becoming the newest member of the new look bomb squad, Sarah? There's a lot of midfielders that are very similar here. I mean, if Sau were to stay, you've still got Bashiru, Colback, Arter, Yates, Sau, who are all Cafu, who are all very similar midfield players. So something might have to give in a sense, mightn't it?
Yeah, I would. They have got a lot of midfielders, and he's fallen down the pecking order. I think I'd agree with Dan that he's not done what we expected from him. When he signed, I thought he'd be really good. I thought he'd be a really key player and make such a difference. But yeah, for whatever reason, it hasn't happened. He's had injury problems, obviously, but it's a tough one. If he doesn't start showing what we know he can do, then you're going to start getting speculation. It will happen again in the summer because there are so many players there of a similar mould. I think the Ben Watson kind of story is probably relevant, that you can feel like you're on your way out and suddenly come back and find your form, be a key player, and become a regular in the team again. So I don't think it's quite time to write him off just yet. But he does need to start showing why Forest brought him in.
Let's finish with very arbitrary marks out of 10 then for the transfer window. How would you? I'll let you go first, Dan. I mean, they got rid of Zach Clough, which I never thought they would, probably by paying him off a bit. Tendai Derrick were the same. Heffeler's still here. There were more outs than ins. So does it qualify as a success? And if so, what number out of 10 would you give it?
Yeah, I'll go steady 7, which is a bit of a cop out, but yes, I think so. I mean, the loan signings you can only really judge a month down the line, and maybe that 7 will either go up or down dependent on whether we've all forgotten that Filip Kravinovic exists in 6 weeks' time when he's only played one more game or something. But the way on first appearances, I think it did look promising. And to kind of reiterate what I said earlier, the Murray signing is good because it at least suggests that Chris Hughton has got some sway in that transfer policy, and there aren't players being kind of handed to him and him expected to fit them into the team. So that is a positive.
And Sarah, what are you saying about it?
After deadline day, I gave it a 5 out of 10, but I think I'll probably. I know. I think I'll probably revise that a bit. Probably a 6. We'll go a little bit higher. I think they have done some good business. I just think they needed another winger. They needed a bit more creativity. That would be my only gripe about the window. I think the players they have brought in on first viewing, they look good. They look like they can add something. They've cut numbers a bit. Like Dan says, they are Hughton signings. He's made that very clear. He stressed that players that have come in are players that he wants. And you can see that in, they're players that he knows, a lot of them. Obviously, he knows Gaten Bong, Anthony Knockaert, Glenn Murray. He wants to surround himself with players he knows that he can trust, and that's no bad thing. I think they've made sure in that window that it's quite sensible business, in that they've not gone out and panic bought a load of players in the hope that they will keep them up. That has to be a good thing, because I think previously in the past that might have happened. So I think it's quite steady. I think it'll be enough probably to keep them up. I just wonder whether they might be made to pay for not getting a little bit more flair and creativity in.
I think they've done all right. I would give them a 7 as well. I'm glad that, like you say, Sarah, we didn't see some random, João Teixeira, Bolly Aribi type signing on the last day who's, never going to kick a ball for us. So that was progress. And I'm hoping, like you're right when you talk about a winger, but I'm hoping that Garner and Kravinovic, as we talked about earlier, get the ball to these wingers to let them do some proper damage and see what they can do. So I'm quite positive. I mean, I suppose I'm always try and be glass half full, but I'm quite optimistic that they're going to finish this season comfortably in mid-table. Brennan Johnson's going to come back. Yes, Brennan Johnson's going to come back. Alex Martin's going to play 40 games. They're going to get in the playoffs next season, and it's going to be a Paul Hart team all over again, but that might be a bit too misty-eyed. Right, I think we'll leave it there. So thanks to everyone who watched along and put comments in. Thank you, Sarah, as usual.
Thank you.
And thank you, Dan. This is your hat-trick ball appearance, but, I don't know, wherever you are in the world, I can't get you a football from here.
No
I can't
cake,
pick it that
no
far.
ball.
No, I know. Well, when the world returns to normal, you're welcome to come to Nottingham, and we'll have celebratory cake and probably beer as well, the way the last year's gone. So thanks very much, Dan, and thanks to everyone who watched along. We shall be back next week with another episode, hopefully discussing another win for Forest. Stay safe, everyone, and we will see you.